Welcome to our quick tutorial on how to make a desktop application using Rapid. This tutorial will cover grids, showing a page as a dialog, and some complex but powerful data copying capabilities within Rapid. The subject of this app is to create a simple logging system that can be used to keep track of a person's details. Let's begin by making our app. Here we can name our app, give it a title and select a theme. With our app created, let's jump into the designer. Here we can name our first page. This page will display information about the people we are going to enter. When this page is finished, it will be able to create entries, edit them and delete them, all with the click or tap of a single button. Page names should be something unique, and we recommend a standardized naming convention. Titles are what users will see in their browsers. With our blank page, it's time to start populating it with controls. Click or drag a panel onto the stage and give it a style class of padding medium and panel 2. Instantly, you can see the effect a theme has in Rapid. Changing the theme will seamlessly update all existing controls with style classes applied to them. Next, grab a grid control and place it inside of our panel. Do not worry if the grid is outside of our panel. Scroll to the page control list and simply drag the panel into the first one. The arrows will indicate where the control will end up. With the grid selected, we are going to give it a few features, as well as populate the columns with titles. To start, give the grid a style class of spacer. This will create a gap below. Give the grid a meaningful name and set the Datastore type to local storage. Now click on the columns header. See the menu that pops up? This is where we can specify our grid details. Start by creating some more columns, making sure they are all visible. Give each column a title that is meaningful in this context. We have already got some titles prepared for the purposes of this demo. Feel free to write the same or similar for your titles as well. With our titles created, we can now give them unique fields to help define them when we change the data later. It is vital to keep these fields in your mind, as you will see these later in the demo. Next, grab a button and place it underneath our grid. Give it a style class of button 1 and spacer. Give the button a unique name and change the label to something meaningful. Things get a little more interesting at this part. Grab a panel and place it under our button. Give this panel a name. Usually we do not name panels unless we want to manipulate them with our other controls. As you may have guessed, this is the goal for this panel. Now drag a button into our named panel. Give it a style class of button 1 to match our other button, and update the name and label to something meaningful. This button will handle our named panel. The cancel button will need to have a click event used to hide the panel. Add a control action and set the control to our named panel. The action defaults to hide, which is exactly what we want to do in this situation. It's time to add the update button. Drag another button and place it next to our cancel button. Set the style class to button 1 and give it a name and a label that makes sense. For now, the update button will only handle hiding our named panel, much like the cancel button. We will come back to the update button capabilities later on in this tutorial. What we can do is copy and paste our click event from our cancel button. Click on the cancel button again, then click on the slips of paper for the control action. Click back onto our update button and click on the add button in the drop-down. See the option paste action is available? Clicking this will allow us to paste the copied action exactly as it was on our cancel button. Finally, drag another button and place it after our update button. This button will handle the removal of data within our grid. Give it a meaningful name and label and set the style class to button 1. This button will also handle the named panel, so we can paste our copied action again as well. The remove button can also have its full functionality implemented right now. Make a click event and select the data copy action. The purpose of this button is to remove a person's details in our grid, so to do this we will need to set the source as null. Next, click on the destinations and add our grid's selected row of data. Finally, click on the little arrows shown on screen and drag the data copy action above our control action to make sure it occurs first. Still with us? Feel free to loop back to an earlier part of this video if you get stuck, and take as much time as you need. For now, we are done with our logger page. Click on the Save button and create a new page. This page will be a dialog that will appear on top of our details page. Be sure to give it a meaningful name. With our dialog page, we are going to start something new. Grab a Datastore control and drag it onto the stage. See how it has appeared in the bottom left of our page? The purpose of the Datastore will become clearer when we start passing data into it. For now, just give it a name. Moving forward, grab 2 panel controls and place one inside of the other. For our inner panel, give it a style class of padding medium and panel 4. Whilst still in focus, give this panel a font size of 20 pixels. This next part will cover a lot of the same details, so we'll go through this part quickly. Remember all of the details we entered in our grid? This page will handle entering and editing of those details. For each piece of information, we'll be grabbing text controls, input controls, and a date control. Remember to give each input control and our date control a meaningful name as well, as we will need this for later. Now that we are up to the level of trust, it is time to introduce a couple of new concepts. Click on our input for our person's likes and look over at the placeholder. The placeholder will allow us to set some faded text to display within the input control. This text will vanish when we start typing into our input, but it is very useful for giving users an example of what we are looking for when it is filled out. We will be doing this for both likes and dislikes. Moving on from here, it's time to introduce another new concept, the score control. Drag a score control and place it after our level of trust text. The first thing we will do is swap out the letters for numbers. In the options header, change the letters from A to D to numbers 0 to 5. In order to do this, you will need to add another score. Another thing we will need to do is enable codes. Set the codes to match our options. Whilst still on our score control, in the score options section, give it a style of color white. Lastly, give the control a meaningful name. Still with us? Feel free to replay parts of the video if you get stuck. Drag another panel and place it after our score control. Give it a style class of padding small and panel 5. Drag another button control into our new panel and set the style class to button 1. Give it a label of Save Person or similar and give it a name to reflect this. Here is where things get a little tricky again. For our Save button, we will give it a data copy action. Set the copy type to bulk and open the bulk data copies window. For the source field, click on the plus button to add all of the controls on our page with names. You will see our Datastore at the top of the list. Drag it to the bottom of the list as it will be most effective there. For our forename input, set the destination to our Datastore and give it a destination field of forename. This destination field may seem familiar, and it should. It is the same as what we set in our grid. The copy type for this is fine to be replace. Moving on, our surname will copy into the data store, just like our forename, except instead of replacing the data, we will be row merging. Do not forget to set the destination field as well. The other sources will follow suit with our surname going into the data store and row merging. Now that our inputs are done, it's time to move on to our data store. For this, we want the destination to be our grid's selected row data. No destination field needs to be set, but we want to change the copy type to append. To finish things off for our Save button, we will give it a control action to hide the page dialog. Seems simple after what we just covered, doesn't it? Grab another button and place it next to our Save button. Set the style class to button1, give it a label of cancel or similar, and set the name to something similar. Next, give it a control action of hide dialog. This page is looking pretty wholesome now, isn't it? We're not done just yet though. Click on the Properties button and in the Page Load Events, make a new bulk data copy action. In the Data Copies window, click on the plus by the destination to bring in all of our page controls. The only exception this time is that we will be removing the data store from our list. For each control, set the source to our data store and set the source field to the fields we set earlier, both in our grid and as our destination fields before. Simple, right? The copy type here is fine to be set as replace. Now it's time to move back to our logger page. Don't forget to save the page before moving back, as we certainly don't want to lose what we've just done. On our logger page, click on the Properties button and give the page a control action to hide our named panel. Next, on our grid, give it a control action showing our named panel. Things start to get a little tricky again at this part. On our Create button, give it a data copy action. Keep the copy type to replace, set the source to null, and set the destinations to our grid's selected row number and our data store on the dialog page. This may not make sense yet, but when we run through our app soon, things will become clear. Whilst still on our Create button, give it a navigation action to our dialog page, remembering to tick the Show as Dialog checkbox. Moving onto our Update button, give it a data copy action. Keep the copy type at replace, set the source to our grid's selected row data, and set the destination to our data store on the dialog page. Next, give it a navigation action to display our dialog page, making sure to tick the Show as Dialog checkbox. Finally, move our initial control action of hiding the panel to the bottom of the list. With this final step, we are done with our desktop app. We have covered quite a lot of ground in this tutorial, and if you found any of it confusing, feel free to re-watch this video to gain a better understanding on what was going on. Before doing that though, what better way to understand something than to go through it yourself? Save the page and hit that View button. As you can see, our grid is empty right now. Click on the Create button, fill in some details and hit the Save button. Without refreshing the page at all, we can see our person has had all of the details we just entered about them show up in the grid. Pretty impressive, isn't it? What happens if we get these details wrong though? Because of the steps we took in making this app, simply click on the person, click our Update button, and the dialog will appear with that person's details ready and waiting. Make all the changes you need, hit the Save button, and presto, the details have been updated. Want to delete a person from your grid? Simply click in a row on our grid and hit the remove button. Just like that, the person has been removed from our grid. Pretty simple, but pretty powerful, isn't it? With the demonstration complete, we are finished with this tutorial. We hope you found it helpful and informative. There was a lot to cover here, and if you didn't quite catch it all on the first try, do not fret. Replay this video and pick up on anything you weren't quite sure on. The rest is over to you. Take the time to explore all of what Rapid has to offer. Have a play around with the other controls, make more people in your grid, and play around with adding in different controls to your grid. That's all for this video. We hope you found it helpful, informative, and a good stepping stone for your involvement with Rapid. Take care, and we'll see you next time.